The void scanner pulsed, its crimson alert flooding the bridge of the Helios breach. Commander Elawan Voss tightened her grip on the console as the readings confirmed what humanity had suspected for centuries: the darkness beyond the Galactic. Rim was not empty. Convergence at bearing 37 Mark IV, announced Navigation Officer Riker Nimitz, his voice steady despite the tension crackling through the ship's atmosphere. Whatever they are, they're coming straight for us. Elawan studied the approaching anomalies. Humanity had spent generations huddled on the outer rim of the Milky Way, exiled from the luminous core by species who controlled the resource-rich inner systems. The galactic powers had drawn their borders with starlight, condemning humans to the darkness beyond, a punishment for the brief but catastrophic war of expansion 2 centuries ago. "Analysis, Dr. Caskill?" Elawan called to the ship's xenobiologist. Morwen Caskill adjusted her ocular implants, her iridescent irises spinning as she processed the data. "They're organic, Commander. Massive entities with bioenergetic signatures unlike anything in our database. They're feeding on the interstellar medium, converting dark matter into conventional energy." Riker's console chirped. "The nearest vessel from the Galactic Coalition is 3 days out, Commander. Protocol dictates we alert them immediately." Elawan hesitated. The Coalition, dominated by the telepathic Lyraxians and the mechanoid octahedron collective, maintained the exile of humanity to the galactic edge. Any contact would be met with suspicion at best, military action at worst. "No," she decided. "These entities are in our territory. We study them first." Chief Engineer Indara Kalex looked up from her station. "Commander, we could try to communicate. The tachyon pulse array might—" The ship shuddered violently, knocking several crew members to the deck. Outside the viewports, space itself seemed to fold, revealing enormous undulating forms that absorbed the distant starlight. Their surfaces, rippled with bioluminescent patterns, communication or simply biological processes, Elawan couldn't tell. "Shields are holding at 60%, reported Security Chief Varric Tamar, his scarred face bathed in the emergency lights. "But they're not attacking. They're scanning us." Elawan stood, approaching the viewport. The creatures, if they could be called that, were magnificent. Where the galaxy ended and the true void began, these beings had evolved to thrive in what the Coalition species considered uninhabitable, just like humans had been forced to do. "They're like us," she whispered. Morwen joined her at the viewport. "Void dwellers. Perhaps they've always been here, watching the galaxy from afar." The largest entity moved closer, its massive form dwarfing the Helios breach. As it approached, Elawan felt a peculiar sensation in her mind. Not invasive like Lyraxian telepathy, but inviting. A connection. "They're trying to communicate," she announced, sudden understanding flooding her consciousness. "And they're warning us." "About what?" Varric asked, hand hovering over the weapons console. The images flooded Elawan's mind faster than she could process. Vast armadas moving through the darkness, ancient beings stirring from the spaces between galaxies, and a terrible hunger that had consumed countless stellar civilizations. "Something's coming," she said, her voice hollow with the weight of revelation. "Something that makes the Coalition look like children playing at Empire. And only those who have learned to survive in the darkness will be prepared." She turned to face her crew, determination replacing fear. "The Coalition exiled us to the edge, thinking it was a punishment. They never realized they were giving us the ultimate strategic position." Beyond the viewports, more void entities emerged from the darkness, forming a living barrier between the Helios breach and the glittering galaxy behind them. "Send a message to all human outposts," Elawan ordered. "The edge of darkness is no longer our prison. It's our fortress." 3 standard weeks had passed since the Helios breach made first contact with the void entities, now designated Umbras by Dr. Caskill's research team. The ship had followed them deeper into the darkness beyond the galaxy's edge, a region the Coalition had ominously labeled the Terminal Expanse on their charts. Translation progress? Elowen asked, studying the holographic representation of the Umbra language, patterns of light and gravitational distortions that seemed to bend reality itself. Lieutenant Zephyr Adaxis, the ship's linguist, manipulated the display with deft gestures. His eyes, augmented with quantum perception implants, tracked patterns invisible to others. It's unlike any language system we've encountered. They don't communicate in sequences but in simultaneous bursts of information. I've adapted our systems to process approximately 30%. That's enough, Elowen decided. What are they telling us? They call themselves the Penumbral Collective, Zephyr explained. They've existed in the void between galaxies for billions of years, and they're not alone out here. On the observation deck, Indara Kalex had rigged specialized sensors to track the Umbra's movements. "Commander, you need to see this," she called over the comms. When Elowen arrived, the view stole her breath. Hundreds of Umbras had gathered, their massive forms creating a living wall that faced away from the galaxy. Their bioluminescent patterns had synchronized into a unified display that pulsed with increasing urgency. "They're in a defensive formation," noted Varric Tamar, who had followed her to the deck. Morwen Caskill analyzed the readings from her portable scanner. "The void between galaxies isn't empty as we've always believed. It's teeming with life forms that evolved without stars. The Umbras are sentinels, guardians." A sudden transmission burst through the ship's systems, crude by human standards, but unmistakable in its intent. A warning, translated into mathematical sequences that even the Coalition species would understand. "They've learned our communication methods," Zephyr said, eyes wide. "They're adapting." The transmission contained coordinates, a location 50 light-years beyond the galactic rim where several Umbras were converging. Without hesitation, Elowen ordered a course change. When they arrived, the Helios breach encountered a sight that defied comprehension. A tear in space itself, not a natural phenomenon like a black hole, but something artificial. Through this rift poured streams of crystalline structures that absorbed all ambient energy. "The phage," Zephyr translated from the Umbra's urgent communications. "Consumers of galaxies." Riker's hands flew across his console. "Commander, I'm detecting a Coalition research vessel near the rift. It's under attack." Elowen's decision was immediate. "Battle stations. Prepare to engage." Varric looked at her in shock. "They're Coalition. They enforced our exile. And they have no idea what they're facing," Elowen replied. "Hail them." The Coalition vessel, sleek with the distinctive architecture of the octahedron collective, was surrounded by crystal entities that drained its shields with horrifying efficiency. On screen, the vessel's commander appeared, a Lyraxian named Sentinel Nixara, her silver skin dull with fear. "This is outside Coalition jurisdiction," she said, dispensing with formalities. "What are humans doing here?" "Saving your lives," Elowen replied. "Follow our lead precisely." The Helios breach executed a maneuver that would have been suicidal by conventional tactics, diving directly toward the crystalline entities while deploying modified shield harmonics developed through studying the Umbras. "The phage feeds on traditional energy," Elowen explained to the stunned Lyraxian. "But the Umbras taught us how to convert our shields to dark energy frequencies. The phage can't process it." As if responding to her words, several Umbras moved to flank the human vessel, creating a corridor of safety through which the Coalition ship could follow. "Why would you help us?" Nixara asked, her telepathic voice tinged with confusion. After everything the Coalition did to humanity, Elowen watched as the Umbras engaged the crystal entities, their ancient battle resuming. "Because what's coming for all of us doesn't care about galactic politics. The darkness beyond the rim isn't empty. It's the front line of a war that's Been raging since before our species existed. The coalition ship fell into formation behind the Helios breach as they retreated from the rift, the Umbras closing ranks behind them. The galactic core species need to know, Elawan continued. Humanity's exile might have been your greatest mistake, and our greatest advantage. We've learned to live in the darkness you feared. The grand conclave chamber of the Galactic Coalition gleamed with the combined light of 7,000 stellar representatives. Located on the artificial ring world of Nexus Prime at the galaxy's core, it represented everything humanity had been, denied for 2 centuries. Elawan stood on the speaking platform, the first human to address the Coalition in generations. Beside her, Sentinel Nixara had vouched for her presence, an unprecedented act from a Lyraxian high official. The evidence presented by Commander Voss is irrefutable, Nixara announced to the assembled delegates. The Helios breach's data regarding these phage entities has been independently verified by our science directorate. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. A towering representative of the octahedron collective stepped forward, its crystalline body refracting light in hypnotic patterns. Sovereign Architect Helix 9, announced the chamber AI. Speaker for the collective. Humans were exiled for good reason, Helix 9's synthetic voice resonated. Their war of expansion nearly destabilized 3 spiral arms. Now they conveniently discover a threat that would force us to welcome them back? Elawan remained calm. We don't seek to return. We come to warn you. And why should we trust the word of edge-dwellers? Challenged Ambassador Kriltex of the Chlorovoric Alliance, his photosynthetic membranes pulsing with skepticism. Because we've learned what you haven't, Elawan replied. How to survive without depending on your precious core systems and stellar abundance. She activated a holographic display, showing footage of the Umbras engaging the phage entities. These void dwellers have been fighting this war for eons. They recognized humanity as potential allies because we, too, have adapted to the darkness you fear. Nixara stepped forward. I witnessed these phage entities myself. They consumed a research outpost of 300 Lyraxians in minutes. Nothing remained. The chamber fell silent. Elawan continued. The Umbras have shown us evidence of dozens of galaxies consumed by the phage, transformed into dead zones devoid of conventional energy. They move slowly but inexorably, and they've found us. From the highest tier of the chamber, a figure emerged that caused even the coalition representatives to straighten respectfully. High Archon Zillith of the primordial species, one of the first spacefaring races in the galaxy whose civilization had endured for millions of years. I have touched the mind of Commander Voss, the Archon stated, her voice resonating directly in the consciousness of every being present. She speaks truth. Elawan felt the Archon's ancient presence withdraw from her thoughts, a violation she had accepted as necessary. The human outposts beyond the rim detected the first phage scouts 3 solar cycles ago, Elawan explained. Without the Umbra's intervention, we would have been overrun. The Coalition's border patrols never noticed because they don't venture into the darkness. Sovereign Architect Helix 9 processed this information visibly, its crystalline structure reconfiguring. What do these Umbras propose? An alliance, Elawan said simply, not just with humanity, but with all galactic species. The phage consumes indiscriminately. And what role would humans play in this alliance? Ambassador Kriltex asked suspiciously. Elawan's expression hardened. The role you forced upon us, guardians of the darkness. Our settlements form a perimeter around the galaxy's edge. We've learned to harness dark energy, to navigate the void between stars. The Umbras recognize this. They've been teaching us their methods. High Archon Zillith floated down to the speaking platform. You propose that humanity, whom we exiled, would become our first line of defense? Ironic, isn't it? Alawan couldn't keep the edge from her voice. You sentenced us to the galactic rim as punishment. Now we're all that stands between you and extinction. The chamber erupted in debate. Through it all, Alawan stood unwavering. On the Helios breach, orbiting Nexus Prime, her crew monitored a growing number of spatial rifts forming beyond the galaxy's edge. The phage was coming in force. Finally, High Archon Zilith raised her hand for silence. The Coalition acknowledges this threat. What do you require, Commander Voss? Technology exchange, unrestricted movement for human vessels, and recognition of our sovereign territory beyond the rim. You demand much, Helix 9 observed. We offer more, Elowen countered. A chance for survival. As the Coalition leaders conferred, Elowen received a priority message from Morwen Caskill aboard the Helios. Breach. The Umbras had detected massive phage movements, not years away as they'd predicted, but weeks. When Elowen shared this update, the chamber's atmosphere shifted from skepticism to urgency. The Coalition accepts your terms, High Archon Zilith announced. Humanity will guard our borders once more, not as exiles, but as the vanguard of galactic defense. As the session concluded, Sentinel Nixara approached Elowen privately. You could have demanded more, reparations for the exile. Elowen watched the Coalition representatives dispersing, returning to worlds bathed in the light of countless stars, a luxury humanity had forfeited generations ago. We don't need their light anymore, she replied. We've found our purpose in the darkness. The human outpost Eschaton Edge glowed with activity, a stark contrast to its humble beginnings as an exile colony. Once a collection of rudimentary habitats, it had transformed into humanity's foremost defensive installation, spanning an asteroid field at the galaxy's outermost reaches. Alawan surveyed the operation from the command center, where engineers and scientists worked alongside Umbra representatives, or rather their manifested forms. The void entities couldn't exist long in normal space without special containment fields that simulated the void's conditions. The dark energy harvesters are operating at 93% efficiency, reported Indara Kalex, now Chief Director of the Dark Energy Initiative. The Umbra modifications doubled our output. Elowen nodded with satisfaction. And the conversion process? See for yourself, Indara replied, bringing up a holographic display of the station's exterior. Outside, massive arrays captured the invisible dark energy that permeated the void between galaxies. This energy, once thought useless to conventional technology, was being converted into defensive shields and weapons systems, unlike anything the Coalition had developed in their star-rich environments. The Coalition representatives have arrived, announced Varric Tamar, now security commander of Eschaton Edge. They seem uncomfortable this far from the core. Alawan smiled thinly. They would be. The Coalition delegation entered the command center, led by Sentinel Nixara and Sovereign Architect Helix 9. They were accompanied by a new figure, Ambassador Kithril of the Synaptic Concordat, a species that had been particularly vocal about maintaining humanity's exile. Impressive installation, Nixara acknowledged, her silver skin reflecting the blue glow of the dark energy converters. Your people have accomplished much in 3 months. Necessity breeds innovation, Alawan replied. Welcome to the front line, Ambassador. Kithril's neural filaments twitched with obvious discomfort. The Concordat still questions the wisdom of providing humans with advanced technology. Your weapons platforms now surpass our own defensive capabilities. They need to, Alawan stated, flatly. The phage doesn't discriminate between species, Ambassador. Either we all survive or none of us do. She led them to the observation deck, where the true scale of humanity's preparations became evident. Hundreds of vessels, some human, others clearly of Coalition design, but modified with dark energy technology, patrolled the perimeter. Beyond them, dozens of Umbras maintained their eternal vigil, their massive forms barely visible except when they chose to emanate their bioluminescent signals. 3 more rifts opened last week, Elowen informed the delegation. The Umbras contained them, but the phage is testing our defenses, learning our patterns. Helix 9's crystalline form shifted in what Elowen had learned to recognize as concern. The core worlds remain skeptical. They've never faced an external threat of this magnitude. Then they're fortunate to have us as their shield, Elowen replied. Dr. Caskill will brief you on our latest findings. Morwen Caskill, now heading the Joint Human-Umbra Research Initiative, activated a secure holographic projection. We've determined that the phage isn't simply consuming energy. It's transforming space itself. Areas they've conquered no longer follow our physical laws. The hologram showed regions beyond the galaxy where space-time had been fundamentally altered. Zones where light, matter, and energy behaved according to alien principles that defied conventional physics. They're not invaders, Morwen explained. They're converters. They remake reality to match their own. Ambassador Kithrill's neural filaments went rigid. This is beyond our comprehension. Not beyond the Umbras, Elowen countered, and not beyond ours, not anymore. We've been developing countermeasures based on principles the Umbras have used for billions of years. She gestured to a nearby engineer, who activated another display showing a new class of vessel under construction. The Void Sentinel program, ships designed to operate in the altered physics of phage-controlled space. Impossible, Helix 9 stated. No conventional materials could withstand such conditions. Conventional, no, Elowen agreed, but we're not using conventional materials. At that moment, alarms blared throughout the station. Varick's voice cut through the chaos. Massive rift forming. All personnel to battle stations. The observation deck's viewports automatically enhanced to show a tier in space, forming less than a light year from their position. Unlike previous incursions, this rift expanded rapidly, its edges crackling with exotic energies that corrupted the very fabric of reality around it. They've adapted, Nyxara realized, her telepathic abilities sensing the shift. They're countering the Umbra's containment methods. Elowen was already moving toward the command center. This is what we've prepared for. Activate the dark matter shield network. As the coalition delegation watched in astonishment, hundreds of satellites positioned throughout the asteroid field generated an interconnected field of dark energy, invisible to conventional sensors, but forming an impenetrable barrier against the phage entities emerging from the rift. Impossible, Ambassador Kithrill whispered. This technology was developed by humans who had nothing left to lose, Elowen finished. Exiled to the darkness, we learned its secrets. The Umbras moved into formation, their ancient defensive patterns aligning with humanity's new technology. Where phage entities touched the dark energy field, they recoiled, unable to process or convert its fundamental nature. It's working, Nyxara observed, unable to hide her amazement. Elowen's expression remained grim. For now. But this is just the beginning. As if to confirm her words, dozens more rifts began to open across the darkness beyond the rim. Commander Elowen Voss had not set foot on Earth in 15 years. Standing now in the ancient war chamber beneath the Himalayan mountain range, she felt like a visitor to her own homeworld. The Global Defense Council, representatives from every human settlement from Earth to the farthest edge outposts, had gathered to hear the latest intelligence. 6 months of continuous phage incursions had taken their toll. Dark shadows hung under every eye in the chamber. The Umbra's predictions were accurate, Elowen reported, activating the holographic display. The phage has established conversion, zones in 7 sectors beyond the rim. The display showed regions of altered space, zones where reality itself had been rewritten according to phage principles. What was most disturbing were the coalition vessels caught within these zones during GEDS, the initial expansion. We've confirmed that captured ships and personnel are being repurposed, she continued grimly. The phage doesn't just consume, it converts. Admiral Orion Castellar, Earth's senior military commander, studied the footage with growing horror. Those vessels are attacking their own kind. They're not their own kind anymore, Alawan corrected. The crews have been transformed at the quantum level. Their very atoms now follow phage physics. Dr. Zephyra Daxis, who had become the foremost expert on phage communication patterns, stepped forward. We believe the phage operates as a singular consciousness across multiple dimensions. It doesn't see conquest in our terms. It sees conversion as evolution, as a gift. Some gift, muttered Riker Nimitz, now captain of his own Void Patrol vessel. Alawan continued. The Coalition core worlds still don't grasp the severity. They believe their superior technology will protect them if our perimeter fails. And the Umbras? Asked Castellar. Fighting as they have for eons, Alawan replied. But they're not inexhaustible. For the first time in their existence, they're facing the possibility of defeat. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity and the Umbras stood as the sole defenders of a galaxy that had never shown them appreciation. A transmission interrupted the meeting. Priority 1 from Eschaton Edge. Indara Calix's face appeared, her expression grave. Commander, we've intercepted a Coalition science vessel attempting to breach the quarantine zone around Conversion Site Alpha. They were captured before we could intervene. The display showed footage of the sleek Coalition vessel being enveloped by crystalline phage structures. Within minutes, the ship's very material composition began to change, its hull transforming into the same crystalline pattern as its captors. They're accelerating the conversion process, Indara reported. And there's more. We detected Lyraxian telepathic emissions from the converted vessel, directed toward the Coalition core worlds. They're using converted telepaths to transmit phage consciousness, Alawan realized. We need to warn the Coalition immediately, Admiral Castellar stood. The Coalition ignored our warnings before. They'll accuse us of manufacturing evidence to increase our influence. Then we don't ask permission, Alawan decided. Humanity has spent generations developing technology that doesn't rely on conventional physics, technology the phage struggles to convert. We deploy everything we have, not just at the perimeter, but in a direct assault on the conversion zones. Protests erupted across the chamber. That would leave Earth exposed, someone shouted. Earth is already exposed, Alawan countered. If we don't contain this now, there won't be an Earth to defend. The Umbras have shown us what happens to galaxies that wait too long. After hours of debate, the Council reached its decision. Operation Dark Fulcrum would commence, the first offensive action against the phage, with every available human vessel and weapons platform redeployed to strike directly at the conversion zones. As the Council dispersed, Morwen Caskill approached Alawan privately. There's something else the Umbras have shared with me, she said quietly. Something they've never attempted before. I'm listening. A final solution. If all else fails. Morwen's voice dropped to a whisper. They can trigger a localized collapse of space-time around the galaxy, essentially severing our region of space from the rest of the universe. The phage would be cut off, unable to spread further. And we'd be cut off as well, Alawan noted. Trapped. Yes, but alive. Alawan stared at the holographic display, watching as more rifts formed beyond the galactic rim. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. As she departed for her flagship, now upgraded with the latest dark energy systems, she received an unexpected transmission from High Archon Zillith of the primordial species. Commander Voss. The ancient being's thoughts resonated directly in Alawan's mind. The core worlds have denied your warnings, but some of us are older than the Coalition itself. We remember other threats from beyond the rim. Then you'll support our offensive? Elowen asked. The primordials will join you, as will others who remember the long darkness before stars burned bright. For the first time in months, Elowen felt a flicker of hope. We move in 36 hours, transmitting coordinates now. As her shuttle departed Earth's atmosphere, Elowen looked back at the blue planet, the cradle of humanity that had nearly forgotten its children exiled to the stars. Now those same exiles were its only hope. The darkness marked our borders, she murmured. Now it defines our strength. The battle had raged for 72 hours without pause. The void beyond the galactic rim, once empty by coalition standards, now blazed with weapons fire, spatial distortions, and the ethereal luminescence of umbras in full combat stance. Aboard the Helios Ascendant, the evolved form of her original vessel, Elowen coordinated the joint forces of humanity, the umbras, and the coalition species who had heeded the warning. Their target, the largest phage conversion zone, where reality itself had been twisted into an alien configuration. Dark matter torpedoes showing 60% penetration of the conversion barrier, reported Varric Tamar, his voice steady despite the chaos visible through the viewports. The primordial vessels are creating a containment field around the breach points. Elowen studied the tactical display, where thousands of vessels fought in perfect coordination. The coalition ships, those that had joined them, were formidable, but struggled against the converted vessels that had once been their own. Only the human-designed dark energy weapons seemed consistently effective. Status on the Umbra convergence? She asked. Morwen Casquille monitored the enormous void entities that had positioned themselves in a precise geometric pattern around the battle zone. They're preparing for synchronized reality reinforcement. When they activate, we'll have exactly 7 minutes to deploy the resonance device. The resonance device, the culmination of human-Umbra collaboration, represented their final hope. Based on principles that even the primordials found difficult to comprehend, it was designed to reinforce normal space-time against phage corruption, essentially reminding reality of its proper configuration. A massive impact rocked the Helios Ascendant. Converted Lyraxian dreadnought on attack vector, Riker called out. Their weapons have been modified. They're using some kind of anti-dark energy pulse. The phage is adapting, Elowen realized. They're learning from each confrontation. Through the tactical network, Sentinel Nixara's voice cut through. Commander Voss, we're losing containment in sectors 4 through 7. The converted coalition ships, they're targeting our command vessels specifically. On screen, Elowen watched as phage entities swarmed a primordial battleship, their crystalline structures fusing with its ancient hull. Within moments, the ship's energy signature changed, its weapons turning against its former allies. They're targeting fleet commanders, Elowen realized. They've identified our command structure. At that moment, a priority transmission broke. Through. High Archon Zillith, her ancient consciousness strained with effort. Commander, the phage has penetrated the outer spiral arm. 3 core worlds are reporting conversion effects in their orbital defense systems. The revelation struck like a physical blow. Despite everything, the phage had found a way past their perimeter. The resonance device is our only option now, Elowen decided. All vessels converge on my position and prepare for phase shift. The human fleet, along with their coalition and primordial allies, executed a maneuver that would have been impossible months earlier, using dark energy propulsion to phase partially out of conventional spacetime, becoming momentarily harder for the phage to target. Umbras are in position, Morwen reported. Resonance activation in 30 seconds. Elowen opened a fleet-wide channel. All vessels prepare for reality fluctuation. Your systems will experience temporal distortion during the resonance event. As the countdown reached 0, the Umbras began to pulse with energy that defied conventional measurement. The space between them warped, creating a lattice of reinforced reality that spread outward like ripples in a cosmic pond. At the center of this pattern, the Helios Ascendant deployed the resonance device, a sphere of impossible geometries that began to rotate in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Reality anchor established," Zephyr Adaxis announced, monitoring the device's effects. "Resonance wave expanding at 1 light-year per minute." Through the viewports, Alawan watched as the wave collided with phage entities and converted vessels. Where it touched them, the crystalline structures seemed to shudder, their alien physics fighting against the reinforced rules of normal space-time. Some of the smaller entities dissolved entirely, unable to maintain coherence. Others, including the converted coalition vessels, began to fragment as the resonance forced them back toward their original state. "It's working," Indara breathed. But their victory was short-lived. At the edge of the battle zone, new rifts began to form, larger than any they had encountered before. Through these tiers in reality emerged phage entities of unprecedented size, their structures more complex and resistant to the resonance effect. "They've been holding back," Elowen realized with growing horror. "Testing our defenses, learning our strategies." The tactical display showed the resonance wave faltering as the new entities generated counter-frequencies that disrupted its expansion. "We need more power," Morwen insisted. "The Umbras can't maintain the reality lattice against this level of opposition." In that moment of crisis, Ilawan made her decision. "Divert all power from the fleet's defensive systems to the resonance device, every ship. That would leave us completely vulnerable," Varric protested. "Yes," Ilawan acknowledged, "but the resonance is our only hope now." As the orders were relayed, ships throughout the battle zone began shutting down their shields and weapons systems, channeling every available joule of energy into amplifying the resonance wave. One by one, the vessels went dark, trusting completely in the strategy. The Umbras responded by contracting their formation, focusing their reality reinforcement more intensely around the human fleet. The primordial vessels moved to intercept. Converted ships that tried to exploit the fleet's vulnerability. Resonance amplitude increased by 400%, Zephyr reported. Wave expansion accelerating. On the main view screen, Elowen watched as the enhanced resonance collided with the massive phage entities. This time, the effect was different. Instead of fragmenting, the entities began to reconfigure. "They're not being destroyed," Morwen observed in wonder. "They're being transformed." The resonance had reached a critical threshold where it wasn't simply reinforcing normal reality against phage physics. It was converting the phage entities themselves to function according to the laws of their galaxy. "Integration patterns detected in phage command structures," Zephyr announced, scarcely believing his own readings. "They're communicating, not attacking." Through the fleet communication network, a new consciousness made itself known, neither human nor Umbra nor coalition, but something that had once been phage, now transformed by the resonance into a form that could interact with normal space-time without converting it. "We seek understanding," the entity communicated in concepts rather than words. "We believed conversion was salvation. Your resistance showed alternative." The battle gradually ceased as more phage entities underwent transformation, the resonance wave continuing to expand through previously converted zones, restoring ships and even personnel to something approximating their original state. Hours later, as the Allied fleet regrouped and began recovery operations, Ilawan stood on the observation deck of the Helios Ascendant, watching as Umbras communicated with transformed phage entities in patterns of light and gravitational distortion that no human could fully comprehend. Sentinel Nexara joined her, the Lyraxian's silver skin bearing scars from the battle. "The Coalition Council is in emergency session. They're voting to formally end humanity's exile." Ilawan smiled faintly. "After all this time, You could return to the core worlds now, reclaim what was taken from your people. Aloan turned her gaze toward the darkness beyond the rim, the vast expanse that had been humanity's prison and had become their strength. No, she said finally. The darkness beyond the rim is our home now, and there's so much more to explore. Nixara seemed confused. But your people have earned their place in the galactic community. The core worlds are offering reparations, technology, exchange, even planetary systems with resource-rich worlds. Look out there, Aloan gestured toward the vast darkness. The Coalition built their civilization around stars, believing that light marked the boundaries of life itself. We've discovered an entirely different kind of existence out here, beings that evolved in the void, civilizations that never needed sunlight. In the distance, transformed phage entities communicated with umbras in patterns of increasing complexity. Their combined knowledge spanned billions of years and multiple physical paradigms. The galactic community only occupies a fraction of what exists, Aloan continued. Humanity has found its purpose as bridge builders between realities. We've adapted to darkness in ways the core worlds never could. High Archon Zilith's consciousness brushed against Aloan's mind, a gesture of respect among the primordials. You speak wisdom, Commander. The primordials once ventured beyond the rim eons ago before fear drove us back to the starlight. Indara Calyx joined them, her eyes reflecting the exotic energies visible through the viewport. The transformed phage entities are offering to teach us about other galaxies they've encountered, places even the Umbras haven't explored. And that's just the beginning, Morwen added, excitement evident in her voice. The resonance technology has applications beyond defense. We could establish sustainable habitats in intergalactic space, create new forms of propulsion that would make conventional FTL obsolete. Aloan turned to face the representatives of the galaxy that had once exiled her people. Humanity doesn't want to return to the core worlds. We're establishing the Void Confederation, an alliance of species dedicated to exploring and settling the darkness between galaxies. You would choose darkness over light? Nixara asked, genuinely puzzled. We've learned that darkness isn't empty, Aloan replied. It's just filled with things you can't see until you've lived in it long enough. 3 months later, at the official signing of the Intergalactic Accord, representatives from across the Milky Way gathered at Eschaton Edge. The station had been expanded to serve as headquarters for the newly formed Void Confederation, a political entity recognized as equal to the Galactic Coalition. The ceremony took place in a vast chamber whose ceiling was transparent to the void beyond. Umbras hovered above, their massive forms visible through special perceptual fields developed by human engineers. Transformed phage entities attended as observers, their crystalline structures now harmonized with normal spacetime. Sovereign Architect Helix 9 of the Octahedron Collective addressed the assembly. 2 centuries ago, we banished humanity to the darkness beyond our borders, believing it to be a fitting punishment for their aggression. In our arrogance, we never considered that the void might contain wonders and terrors beyond our understanding. Today, we acknowledge that what we intended as exile became humanity's greatest opportunity. Aloan, now holding the title of Void Admiral, signed the accord on behalf of human territories. The agreement established new principles of cooperation between galactic and void-dwelling civilizations, with humanity serving as the natural intermediary. The darkness marked the border of the galaxy, she stated, echoing words that had become a mantra among human settlements. And we thrived beyond it. As the ceremony concluded, Aloan met privately with Morwen, Indara, Varric, Riker, and Zephyr, the original crew who had first encountered the Umbras aboard the Helios breach. The exploration fleet is ready, Riker reported. 50 vessels, crewed by volunteers from every human settlement, and 17 coalition species who've requested to join the Void Confederation. The Umbras have mapped a path through the intergalactic medium Morwen added. They believe there are other void-dwelling civilizations between here and Andromeda. Elawan smiled, feeling a familiar sense of anticipation, the same she had felt when first leading her ship beyond the galactic rim years ago. The Coalition feared what lay beyond the light, she said. They never understood that true discovery begins at the edge of darkness. 2 days later, Elawan stood on the bridge of the Helios Transcendent, the third evolution of her original vessel, now equipped with technologies that blended human ingenuity, Umbra ancient knowledge, and transformed phage dimensional insights. All. Expedition vessels report ready, Admiral, Varric announced from his station. Outside the viewports, the galaxy that had once rejected humanity glowed like a spiral of diamonds against the infinite black. But Eloan's gaze was fixed on the darkness ahead, not empty as once believed, but teeming with possibilities that conventional wisdom had never imagined. Take us beyond, she ordered. The Helios Transcendent led the expedition fleet into the darkness, leaving behind the glittering border of the galaxy. Humanity had been forced into exile among the stars, only to discover that their true destiny lay in the spaces between them. For it was humanity who had learned the greatest lesson of all, that darkness doesn't mark the end of existence, but merely the beginning of a greater understanding. Where light fails, humanity endures. Where others see emptiness, we find wonder. Where borders end, our journey begins.